All right, for those of you just joining us, welcome. My name's Diana Sinton. I am part of iGuide, contributing to the Education and Workforce Development team. This is going to be one of our weekly VCOs. We're just going to wait another minute or two to let uh, people continue to arrive. This is being recorded, so once the file has been processed, we'll make sure that it gets up onto our website. This is also a regular Zoom meeting, so you're in control of your own microphones. Please keep yourself muted as you currently are until there'll be an opportunity for question and answer at the end. We'd like to have these be as interactive as possible, so feel free, especially if you're thinking of questions, put them down into the chat. We might not address them until the end, but we're happy to receive your comments throughout. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our two presenters for the day, Dr. Eric Shook and Jinzhe Wang, both from the University of Minnesota, and they're going to be talking about the ways they've been developing the Guide's Convergence Curriculum for Geospatial Data Science and the ways that AI is playing a role in that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Eric,
Yeah, thank you, Diana.
and turn it over to you for sharing.
All right, so I think the problem with this is sometimes on Zoom, it adds a little box around it and it's really hard to control it otherwise. But is it displaying okay on Zoom?
Yeah, you can tell it might be slightly cut off at the bottom, but yeah, it looks good.
Okay. So yeah, welcome to today's talk, everyone. What we're going to be doing is a really quick introduction to the Convergence Curriculum for Geospatial Data Science. And if you want more of an in-depth review, we have several other VCOs that we've hosted. It's all online, open and available for you to check out. What we want to do is just do kind of a quick recap of that, and then talk about the ways that we are incorporating how we're teaching AI into the Convergence curriculum. But most of our presentation is really focused on how we're exploring to use AI in generating or producing and reviewing curriculum content, and we'll kind of get into it and leave some time at the end for questions. So just kind of a quick review for the convergence curriculum that iGuide has created. I like to do a very quick kind of overview starting from the beginning, that the university model of most education is what we affectionately call the T model, where you have knowledge breadth. These are your gen eds or your liberal art requirements. And then you have knowledge depth, which tends to be whatever your major is. We've realized that having one area of knowledge isn't always great. So a lot of students now will either double major or major and minor, where they have kind of maybe two legs of knowledge depth, and we call this the pie model. The problem with this is at the bottom of the knowledge depth, there's no real connection. So what we've been trying to advocate for in the convergence curriculum is something that we call the U model, where we intentionally build in connections as you go deeper into kind of the knowledge areas and provide kind of multiple touch points in order to help learners understand how topic A connects to topic B. So we have a lot of pre-recorded videos and materials available. If you'd like pointers to that, feel free to drop it into the chat. So the way that we've designed the convergence curriculum is starting from the bottom. We have something that's called foundational knowledge threads. These kind of provide the base structure of what we build on top. And this includes ethics, analytics, geospatial computing, and visualization. Then we start going into knowledge connections, where we start to mix and match those foundational knowledge threads. Then we go up one layer, which is what we're focused on for today's talk, which is something that we call knowledge frames. This is where we're starting to introduce technology to frame what it is that we're trying to look at and explore. And we're particularly focused on GeoAI for this particular talk, but then we can go up to geospatial data science, then we ultimately get up to knowledge convergence. So if you want more material, we have some links available and we can share it in the chat. The other way that we have the curriculum developed is a modular structure. We recognize that different learners are going to want to have different depths of knowledge for each of those boxes that I just showed. And the way that we've structured it in the human created content, at least, is 3 sentences. So if you only need a micro introduction to GeoAI, we can do it in about 30 seconds with 3 sentences. Or we can have 3 slides. Takes, 3 to 5 minutes in a lecture. Or the more in-depth one, which is a 3-hour module. It includes a 1 hour lecture with lecture notes, a hands-on activity, and a reading and reflection. So for each of those boxes that you saw in this picture for the Convergence curriculum, we have 3 sentences, 3 slides, and a 3-hour module. And this is something that we've been building over the last couple of years. I say years plural because that comes into play with the AI content that we're talking about in terms of AI generated curriculum material. So this has been a really robust process. It has been going probably slower than we would have hoped for. But what we've been trying to do is build a system and make it systematic such that we have hopefully a consistent curriculum materials and allow the process to be kind of reproducible in some way or replicable in some way of generating kind of consistent materials. We also designed it to have a very efficient structure, which we can go into in a little more depth. Where we nest our 3 sentences and our 3 slides. Our 3 slides are the intro for our 1 hour lecture slides. We also try to build in connections to other materials, such as the UCGIS body of knowledge, which is in and of itself a huge repository of curriculum resources that's available for the geographic information science and technology community. So what I wanted to do was just do kind of a process of how do we actually build curriculum? How have we been kind of going through the process of doing it for iGuide so that when we're talking about it with AI, we have kind of a cross comparison. And really what we start with is needing some level of content in terms of curriculum, whether that be slides, whether that be readings, whether that be some sort of hands-on lab activity. And generally, we're going to have some sort of an author create that content. They're going to draft it, they're going to redraft it, refine it, etc. So this is our first kind of production feedback loop, right? Then in our iGuide, we actually have a peer review process. So the content will actually go to a reviewer. The reviewer provides feedback to the author. The author revises the content, feeds it back to the reviewer, and that might go one cycle, that might go multiple cycles. Then ultimately, we have an approver. So eventually the content reaches some sort of a threshold where we say it's good enough and we can publish it. And then that's what actually goes onto the iGuide website. So this is kind of the process that we've been refining. And we have a review checklist for reviewers for all of our content. We have kind of explainer docs for authors that are going through this. And then we have a final approval process. In fact, we have a number of UCGIS community champions going through this process right now. We have 5 phenomenal individuals developing curriculum content following this exact process. They've all created their 3 sentences, 3 slides that's going under review right now. We're going to be giving them feedback, and then they're going to be starting building their 3-hour modules. So they have been absolutely wonderful in kind of going through the process and helping us kind of solidify it as what I would say is like new users of the process. But this is a lot of human time. We get very high quality results this way is, obviously what we're hoping, but we have experience doing community champion work in previous years in the Our experience has always been really good. And if you're looking for the material that the community champions will be developing, it will be available, as well as we have some team members that have AI curriculum already on the platform. I was going to give you the live link, but it seems like the platform is having a glitch right now. But if you just go to i-guide.io, you can find the AI curriculum that's already available. And you can see where we're at with that. We also link to the UCGIS body of knowledge, which has 414 topics. This has been an effort that has been spanning more than a decade. We have content level experts that are authoring topics led by a wonderful editor and editorial team, including Diana here. And the reason why I'm doing these shout outs is to kind of establish when we talk about AI generated curriculum, everybody wants to go straight to the kind of buzzwordy jargon, hands up in the air. And I want to talk about a little bit what is the actual process and what's the time frame that it takes in order to do this type of work at scale. So this is kind of our baseline, right? Um, and then it allows us to have a realistic conversation about what would an agentic curriculum building process look like. For those who've not heard this term, agentic is a artificial intelligent based system where we use agents, where we are pre-programming basically a workflow using large language models or what they call multimodal models that might be able to either ingest or produce images, videos, etc. But the agentic system allows us to build kind of these you don't really want to call them free thinking, but these procedural processes that can be very fine-tuned and controlled to do different actions. They can use tools if you want them to. In this kind of presentation, what we've been doing with iGuide is fine-tuning them to build curriculum materials. And we'll talk about what that means in just a second. So, as a review, curriculum development, the human process, we have content that needs to be produced. We get an author. We then invoke multiple, sometimes reviewers, to look at the content that the author produced. And that is the peer review process. Then there is an approver that decides should it go back to the author to revise the content. It's not up to the quality bar, or does it get published, right? So this is the process. Now, if you are a educator and it is, 11 p.m. at night and you have a lecture at 8 a.m. in the morning, you might be the author, the reviewer, and the approver of your own curriculum materials for class the next morning. But at scale, we a lot of times will split these roles. But sometimes the same human might be the author, the reviewer, and or the approver in terms of what is okay in terms of the quality. So let's look at what happens when we start inserting AI and where can we insert AI and what is it called. So this is what we're going to affectionately call the human loop, right? We have three humans. They could all be the same human, but this is kind of the loop process. For AI generated material, one of the buzzwords is called human in the loop. This is where you have AI being the author, but you have a human reviewer. So the AI generates a material, the human, myself, for example, looks at it and decides this is good, this is not good. If it's not good, if you're in a chat-like environment, whether that be ChatGPT, Gemini, like whatever the system is, you reprompt and you have it regenerate, right? And you go through that process until you reach a point of quality where you say, oh, this is good enough. And then you go to the review, you approve it, right? So this is what we call human in the loop. Now, the key here is that the content that is created is AI, right? So the AI is authoring the content. So at the end of this process, you have AI created content. Another way that you can do it as human in the loop is using AI as the reviewer. So in this way, you create content and then you actually pass it to an LLM and you say, review it with these perspectives. This can be helpful in helping kind of understand maybe flow issues, language, kind of refine some things and everything else. But in this case, human in the loop, you have human created content that just has AI kind of making suggested changes, right? But the human is actually making those changes. We can also do human in the loop, what I would call pre-publication. So in this case, we have AI is authoring, AI is reviewing itself, right? And this could go multiple rounds until it hits a quality bar that a human says this is good enough as the approver, and then we have AI created content. Um, Another way that we can do it is something that's called human on the loop. This is something that a lot of people, if you're not very familiar with AI, haven't really seen as much or isn't talked about as much. But this is a process that is adopting or is being adopted a lot in development, especially is you have AI that is authoring material and is also a lot of times kind of reviewing. So there's kind of this feedback loop, but the human is kind of overseeing what's going on. Sometimes they will nudge, sometimes they'll just let it go. And then ultimately the AI will approve it and say this is done, right? But the human is on the loop, watching, nudging, and kind of being the manager of the process, right? So they're kind of in it, but not quite in the same way as what we would say human in the loop. So this is yet another way. And then we can say human out of the loop, right? Fully autonomous AI author, AI reviewer, AI approver, right? This is the one that makes a lot of academics nervous because at this point, you have no humans doing quality checks. You have no humans checking for anything, right? This is a bar that, we can have discussions about later on, right? But these are when we're talking about how do we include AI in curriculum development, these are some of the popular ways that you would be able to do it, kind of distilled down into a couple of pictures. So with that, I want to give a little bit of a progress update as to where we are with iGuide and then open it up for a little bit larger discussion. So we kind of talked about what do we do as humans? What's our current development process using humans? What are the options available for AI? And now we're going to talk about what are we actually doing? What have we tested? Where are we at in terms of curriculum development? So, first off, I want to clarify kind of our goal of what we're working on right now with iGuide. What we're shooting for and what we've been really targeting in terms of kind of research development and eventually content creation is what we would call pre-publication. So, we are trying to fine-tune the process of using AI to author material, AI to review that material, but we will have a human at the end that will be the approver, right? So we won't go fully autonomous where we're just generating stuff. At the end of the process, we will have a human that basically says, yes, this meets a quality bar. And if not, it goes back into the process. And really, what is interesting about this is how do we fine tune that loop so that we only have to do it first pass? But that's a different conversation for the end of the presentation. So we're kind of focused on the left part of the diagram is this kind of feedback loop. We're not worried so much about how do we kind of fine tune the approval process because we're really focused on the left part. So this is kind of what we're trying to work on right now and what we want to present. So first off, we have a barrier actually for a lot of educators in that when we say we want to have an agentic system kind of author and review materials, how do you include the educator, right? So our first focus is interfacing educators with AI. And this is where I pass the microphone to my wonderful PhD student who has been working on this. She worked on this last semester. We took a break for some GeoAI related research, and we're back at it again. So she's going to talk about some of the work that she's been doing in terms of building out this interface. And with that, I'd like to pass the microphone.
Thanks, Eric. Hi everyone, I'm Jinzhe, and in the next few minutes, I'm going to briefly introduce our AI interface, show the prototype, workflow, and what we gonna to do for the next step. So, for the motivation of an AI interface, I doing this because for instructors, creating teaching materials for the interdisciplinary topics can be very time consuming, while for students, it can also be difficult to quickly access brand new learning materials when exploring a new topic or area. So the idea for the AI interface is building an interface to support these needs, starting with instructor need first. Here is a small interface prototype. As you can see here, you can enter your topics, separate them by comma, upload your PowerPoint template if you wanted to do so, and then click on the button. It will first give you a preview, show the title, description, discussion. It will also automatically find an image which fits your topic, and then provide the PowerPoint file and the video with audio for you. But it's just a prototype. We are still working on this. And here is the AI interface workflow. See how it actually works. First, the user gonna give the AI agent an input, and once the agent receives that, it will directly start generating the content, generating the slides, and also generating the audio, then combine together to make it as a video output and also the PowerPoint file. And here is a very small and easy generated video just for reference for people get a sense of like what's going on here. Since Eric is muted, it should have audio, but it doesn't matter. So uh, it basically just a video with audio introduce the content and place a image for people to reference it and promoting a discussion question, something like that.
Sorry, everyone. Apparently, the YouTube to slide to Zoom audio is not working. What I could hear and no one else could is actually a synthetic AI voice that the text is fed into an audio generator, which is then embedded into the video. This will be available online as part of the presentation afterwards when we publish it. So for those who are curious, we'll have this available. So sorry about that little technical snag.
And once again, it's just a small prototype, so it's not the final deliverables. What I wanted to do for the next step is producing more materials in adaptive lengths and formats, producing including PowerPoint, Jupyter notebooks, and videos. Beyond that, we also wanted to enable the AI agents to produce and review existing curriculum materials and refine its own generated materials over time. Also support different type and levels learning materials. In the future, we wanted to apply the workflow to produce and publish curriculum content for iGuide platform and interdisciplinary courses. That's all for the brief introduction for the interface prototype, and I will hand it back to Eric. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Andy. I forgot to check that and test it. I should have did that. I'm not used to using video with audio, but obviously we had that demo in order to do. What is interesting about that piece is that especially as we start looking at curriculum material to meet all of the ADA requirements that are coming up, having the ability to have the kind of computer generated kind of lecture notes, so exactly what is going to be said in the video, and then having the generated audio that you can export both as video as well as just separate audio if somebody just wants to listen, is kind of a powerful piece. So this is really exciting because as we start fine-tuning that process, it links into the second focus, which is the agentic development of that little feedback loop of going author and reviewer. And just as kind of a little reminder of what we're talking about full scale, we have the content, we're going to have an AI author, we're going to have an AI reviewer, we're going to have a human approver before publication, but ultimately it'll be AI created content, right? So this is really the part that we're focused on the second part of the focus area. And we have, I would say, four major questions that are becoming experiments for us to test. And I kind of color coded them to focus the conversation a little bit. And the first question that we have with AI generated content is two really kind of big pieces. One is the type of the content, and the second is the length of the content. So, based on our preliminary experiments, if the length of the content is too long, the agent tends to meander a bit, right? So, anybody who's worked with LLMs and used AI, after a while, you kind of get what's called context rot. So the context window of understanding for a lot of these LLMs starts to deviate a little bit from what you wanted to do. So that does limit right now with current models the length of content and the process, I should say, not just the models, but the process. So we're experimenting what is the kind of best length that we can get out of the content and still have a very high quality bar. The second question is the type of content. So different models have different capabilities, have different kind of abilities to do different things. And what we're experimenting with is how well do AI models work for generating, let's say, like slide content. So slide content for lectures usually is a little higher level. A lot of times this is where instructors would introduce like theory, let's say. And that is different types of content than like a hands-on exercise using a Jupyter notebook. But those are different types of content that might work better or worse with the workflow and the agentic system that we're building. So these are kind of the first two big questions is kind of linked to content. The next one is the production process. I have these backwards, so four should probably be three. What should be the loop of generating the content just in that loop right there? And then the next one is the author reviewer review cycle, right? So we have the process of the AI generating the content, and then we have a different process for review. So these are really kind of the four big questions that we're looking at in terms of what are the appropriate processes and what type of content can we realistically generate using an agentic development system. Now, notice here, this will change in 6 months to a year because as AI advances, the ability to have longer lengths or changes in the ability of doing author review cycles will also change as AI advances. But, we're looking at a snapshot of right now. And this is where I want to open up the discussion a little bit because a lot of people, once I start talking about this, a lot of people start asking very high level questions, especially if you're kind of into pedagogy or if you're an educator and a very thoughtful instructor of like, where is this leading? Um, and I really think that this Hemingway quote is the one that I'm going to be using for the next couple of months as we're talking about agentic curriculum development. And this comes from a book from the 20s. The Sun Also Rises. This quote is used very heavily in lots of different places. And it goes, how did you go bankrupt? Bill asked. Two ways, Mike said, gradually and then suddenly. And I think what's happening in what I'm starting to see as we're running these experiments and building out these workflows is that it's a very slow process for us to answer these questions, right? As we're fine tuning what is the process for production, what is the process for review, what is the appropriate content that can be produced. Once those questions are answered and we can do a cycle where it's either the first time it's produced, it can be approved, or maybe a second, suddenly there is a big shift. So we're doing gradually and then suddenly. So I do think that this is something that we need to pay attention to, and I'm happy to have open up the conversation about this. And we intentionally kind of left some of the slides and some of the technical details shortened so that we can actually open it up for discussion. I like doing the VCOs where we have a little bit bigger Q&A. But I do think that opening this up and talking about it here makes a little bit of sense. Because usually we get here anyway, so I'm just kind of introducing it ahead of time. So back to the technical details. What is it that we're actually doing? So for the agentic workflow, we have a base model or a base kind of agent workflow that we're testing right now. And the code is going to be available. Right now, we have a glitch on the iGuide platform, so I couldn't upload it right before the talk. But once the platform comes back up, like later this afternoon, I'll upload the actual Jupyter notebook that is being used to test this right now. So I'll show a little snapshot of the code of what we're talking about, and happy to answer questions. But right now, the agentic workflow that we have is we have an agent that basically brainstorms topics, or brainstorms sub themes and different things related to the topic at hand. So if you say, I want to generate content for GeoAI or foundation models for GeoAI, it will brainstorm different things to talk about. And this basically builds up a context and kind of some ideas that then get fed into the writer of the material. So the writer is prompted to basically take the original topic and the brainstormed kind of sub themes and different things that you could think about and write whatever it is that we're talking about. One of the things that we're experimenting with is a 9-minute hands-on Jupyter notebook on whatever the topic is. Another one that we're going to be experimenting with is going to be the slide deck, so we can do a cross comparison between content type. And we'll also mess with the length. But this goes into the writer. Once the writer generates the material, it goes out to 3 reviewers right now. Each of these reviewers is prompted by LLMs to do something a little differently. So we have one that's geospatial. We have one that's kind of a computational scientist looking for technical pieces. And we have one who kind of serves as kind of a pedagogy education person looking for different stuff. The reviewers are all prompted to provide feedback on whatever's written from their perspective. All 3 of those reviews then get fed to an editor. The editor is prompted to take the reviews, take the original written content, and make suggestions, just like our regular peer review cycle, right? So we're mimicking the peer review cycle for a lot of journals where it goes out to a couple of reviewers. The reviewers make content. The editor, reads across the reviews, looks at the material, makes some suggestions, and then sends that back to the author. So the editor makes suggestions, and then that goes to a reviser. So the reviser takes the original draft, the reviews, the editor comments, and then is tasked with taking all of that and revising the original content. That then goes to a copywriter or copy editor, where the copy editor is tasked with not changing any actual content, just, helping with prose and, making sure that the language is good. And then it's produced, right? So this is the workflow. And this is programmed in Python. This will be available as a Jupyter notebook on the iGuide platform probably this afternoon. And if we kind of model it with the figure that you just saw, we're going to feed content into this. It's going to go through the system, and then we're going to have AI created content at the end for somebody to review. And we have a wonderful undergraduate student, Mahmoud, who's going to be working on this now. He has the base. It's currently spring break right now, and he's going to start working on it later this week and into next week. The other big question about this that we haven't gotten into, but is a kind of a technical question for us, and will be a question for anybody who starts getting into kind of agentic workflow building for curriculum, is what AI models do you use? So there are different kind of capabilities with different AI models, and those capabilities come with a cost. So if we use some smaller nano models, they are, a fraction of a penny to use. And if you use some of the frontier cutting edge models, they can be, pennies to dollars, right? And the open question here is that for each one of these boxes, which model is best to use? Because we can fine tune the model for each of these steps. And that, of course, will change as AI advances, but is one of the things that we're going to be experimenting with. And once you see the Jupyter Notebook, you'll see how we're able to actually fine tune that for each one of these steps. So that code will be available hopefully this afternoon, if not tomorrow. It'll be available online. So just check back, and we'll have it posted. What does the code look like? This is a little snapshot of the Jupyter Notebook. So this is Python code. So if you don't know Python, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time using this because we don't have it behind the interface that Jinzhe is working on. So right now you have to use the notebook, but pretty soon we're hoping that we'll have that interface where you just do the topic and it goes to the agentic system. But this is the Python code for the figure that you just saw. And it's as easy as this, and we can kind of make changes and everything else. And this is kind of one of our test prompts. This is a really basic prompt, but allows people to see and kind of experiment with their own ideas. One of the things that we're trying to do with this notebook is actually make it really hopefully as easy as possible for educators to be able to play and experiment with the system themselves, right? So we're trying to avoid what we would say is like super advanced features or require a really deep technical knowledge, because what we want to do is make it so that this question could actually be answered by you if you have a little bit of Python experience and, $10 in AI credits. Um, and then you can test for your content and what you would like to do. And then on the science side, kind of the research side, we want to be able to understand what are the current capabilities of this system, what's our kind of the limitations, and what are some of the, let's say, best practices that people can follow that increases the likelihood that you have better generated content from the first start or a better review cycle, et cetera, et cetera. The upper right picture here is um, a slide template that is being generated to feed in from the agentic system, which is trying to model the iGuide template slides that we have available already. And then we're going to be experimenting with the different modes of content that get output. So slides we've seen, videos we've seen. We're also going to be, notebooks will be available on iGuide platform. What we haven't really experimented with is readings. Right now with the curriculum, we tend to point to other readings like the UCGIS Body of Knowledge. I like that in particular because those are written by content level experts. So having those readings provide context for anything AI generated right now, at least is where I feel most comfortable. I will say that as AI advances and as we're fine-tuning this process, having AI generated readings actually is, I think, going to have some advantages. And if I just jump back, sorry for the flash, but I think the readings are interesting for the second bullet point that we italicized for students because I think that it could give us an ability to make different readings for students at different learning levels or coming from different interdisciplinary backgrounds. That would be really hard for a human author to make all the variations. However, having kind of a student-driven interface, I think right now we're not quite at that stage. Instead, we're doing instructors so that we have kind of a expert approver at the end of this. But this is kind of an option that we could have moving forward. So this is kind of where we're at. I am not going to do a live demo today because we've had enough crashes on a couple of things. So the code will be available on the platform this afternoon. And what I would like to do is open it up for Q&A in our last about 15 minutes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them out in the chat. Otherwise, I'll go to the chat in just a second. I haven't looked at it yet. Otherwise, what we'll do is just have people unmute your microphone if you're brave enough. Background sounds are fine. We just want to have a conversation. We would like to acknowledge, of course, National Science Foundation providing the support and the iGuide team. While we're presenting, there's a number of people behind the scenes that have all contributed to a lot of this work. So, a huge shout out to especially the Education Workforce Development team for helping with us. So with that, we just want to thank you for your time, and I want to hopefully have a little time for discussion at the end of this VCO. I'll stop sharing here. That way we can see each other. I can go back to the slides if anybody does have a question, but any questions?
One quick question, Eric, that's there in the chat from Xiao asks about the framework that you use to build the agent.
Yes. So the framework for the agentic system is LangChain and LangGraph, which is probably one of the de facto standard agentic frameworks. And the the notebook that I'll upload in this afternoon kind of is well commented to kind of help people understand if you've never seen LangChain or LangGraph code before. It's the learning curve is not bad, even if you don't have a lot of AI experience. And we spent a significant amount of time trying to really streamline the code, which took longer than I care to admit. We've gone through multiple iterations trying to really make it hopefully fairly approachable so that it can be easily understood and modified. And usually you get one of those, but not both. So we really tried to balance it out a little bit to hopefully not scare everybody off. Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, here we go. Okay.
Oh, it's a Stephen one. Here we go.
Steven, there we go. Okay, give me a second so I can, well, I'll just read it out loud. That way for those who might be just listening in and can't see the chat, because if people join on their phones, they can't always see the chat very well. So as you note, the AI tools and skills are changing rapidly. The convergent framework itself supposed to meet the need, supposed to probably meet the needs to develop a specific set of skills among humans. The larger question is, how are you thinking about the human in the loop at the highest level, say 3 years from now? This is outside the presentation, but how are you thinking about the overall purpose and project right now? Ah, yes. Okay. So meta
Eric,
question.
as you're thinking about Stephen's questions there, it'd be really interesting, and this was going to be my question. Maybe you could respond to that within the context of your being a faculty member at University of Minnesota. I'm curious too about with this curriculum design in general and the human in the loop, how does this fit into what Minnesota's guardrails or guidelines or guidance, what might be?
Yeah, okay. There we go. So now we're off to the races for these. I love these conversations. Yes, I've been in panels, in discussion groups for AI and curriculum teaching pedagogy at the college level at University of Minnesota, at the university level at University of Minnesota, in a couple of different hats. I'm not one of the key roles, by the way, just like I've participated. So one of the things, so I'll start with the University of Minnesota, and I'm going to work to Stephen's question because I think that we can go a little bit lower level and then we'll work our way up. So I said something provocative in an open pedagogy and AI for the liberal arts. I was in kind of a bigger discussion that was like a half day. And I said, what I find interesting about the AI conversations is most of our focus is in creating policies and procedures to regulate how students can use it and when and if and how and everything else. And I said, currently at the University of Minnesota, when I said it, there is not a single AI policy or procedure that would limit me from creating a course using exclusively AI and running the entire course over AI, right? So all the policies and procedures are trying to, especially catch cheating, right? Like that's what everybody's focused on. But there really isn't like a policy where we have to put a rider in our syllabus that says some of the content generated in this course is AI generated, which I find to be very interesting. I think we're going to get there, but at the time, like it at least hadn't been created yet. So, um, and then kind of going to Stephen's question, looking a little bit above. So, I think that the reason why I brought in that Hemingway quote is we are going to fight it as faculty up until a point, and then we are going to see a change shift. I'm becoming more and more convinced of that as I experiment and test. And the whole reason why I say that is time, right? It takes so much time to create quality curriculum material. And the focus of a lot of the agentic curriculum, should we ever have AI creating learning or instructional materials for students? A lot of people want to compare against the best ever curriculum ever generated ever by a human ever with something on AI. What they rarely say is it's 11 p.m. at night. I have a lecture that I have to give at 8 a.m. That isn't always the best work, right? But it is practical in terms of what does happen in a university classroom, right? So the question is, given that, would you rather have an agentic system help you up the bar a little bit, or not, right? Right now, the question is probably not, because I think that it's still too hard, right? I think that the systems aren't quite there yet. I think that the way of getting there isn't there yet. But once that is pushed, I think we're going to see a wholesale shift. That's my personal Eric hat, or even I'll say faculty member at University of Minnesota hat, not necessarily iGuide. So in terms of looking at it for the purpose of the project, I think one thing that I really see a huge benefit for the convergence curriculum for geospatial data science specifically is I think that we can have it do another round of agentic review to help with consistency across the materials that are already generated. So I think that, as humans, we would like to see that the slides over here align with the slides over here, and that doesn't always happen. I think an agentic system has the capabilities of being able to improve that. I'm not saying make it perfect, I'm just saying improve that. So I think that's going to be piece number one. I also think that as we think about the U model that I introduced right away, I think that there is a big opportunity for having subject experts write, geospatial and computing, and then as we start looking at the connection points more and more, I think that there's an opportunity for the agentic system to help bridge those connections because that tends to be the hard part for the subject matter experts. When you ask somebody geospatial to say, can you talk about AI? There's a very small number of people that can do that. Fortunately, we've recruited many of them as community champions to write material for us. But the number is small, and especially as then you say applied to a topic, the number shrinks down even more. So if we can have an agentic system help with that, I think that there's a lot of promise because then in the review cycle, if you have humans, or the approval process, you can have multiple subject matter experts say, yes, that actually is good and says the appropriate things and meets a quality bar. So that's kind of my long rant trying to answer both questions simultaneously. Does that make sense? Or do either of you have follow-up questions? Because this is what I'm here
Oh, I
for. I
have
love
so
these
many
questions.
follow-up questions. I don't even want to. There's some others in the chat. And when I meant the project, I really mean sort of the at the biggest level. Let's identify skills that humans need. Let's figure out efficient ways to teach them. Let's figure
Yep.
out efficient ways to connect, as you're talking about. And there's lots of good reasons, I think, right now to question that as a project. And so I meant that in the largest sense of the project, like how to teach people expertise. Uh, so I'll stop though, because you have lots of
I'll
people.
give you
We'll
a
keep
two
talking about it.
sentence scary answer for some educators right there, and it goes back to that bullet point that we had italicized for students, right? If you have an agentic system that allows you to do A/B testing for students, you could totally automate that. It's a scary proposition, and it's a different thing entirely, but is technically feasible, and I think we're getting there. Not as iGuide, by the way. I'm just saying we as like society and science. Yeah. So I'll move on. So Andy Anderson's question is, what has been your experience generating images for documentation? Yes, okay, so the context in my experience, image generation is the most time-consuming part. AI is bad at generating the technical illustrations. I fully agree with that. I actually think that that's probably going to be one of the biggest limitations of this so far. So much that our interface right now, we tried doing Jinzhe experimented a little bit trying to pull either auto-generated images or doing a search using one of the tools, I think. And it was terrible, right? Like the first couple of prototypes were like off. So right now we force humans to do that. For the purposes of the iGuide project, I don't think that that problem is something that we're actually going to tackle. I think we're just going to like kick that off and just say like a human has to do that part. From a University of Minnesota hat, this is something that I think that we will look at in the future because I do think that it is something that could be helpful. But and there's kind of two pieces to it of image generation itself or image finding. Image finding, I think right now would have a little bit more, I think that you'd have a little more success with that, but that's a different problem altogether. Um, And yeah, okay. So the GUI next question is GUI graphical user interface. It'd be helpful for instructors. On the other hand, would frameworks eventually level teaching materials worldwide, just like the LLM works? Um, Yeah, I think that that's another meta level question, right? So if everybody's using the same system for materials, we all start to converge on the same generic stuff, right? I do think that this is a little bit of a danger of the way that these curriculum materials can operate. And right now, that's why we were very intentional about not saying we're going to go fully autonomous. I think that humans should still be the final approver before publication right now. Even so, even with that, you're still operating where LLMs are going to pull you if it's AI generated content. So then the open question becomes, is there a scientific approach that kind of pulls you back to wherever the educator wanted you to go? Now, I think that there's an open question about educators using pre-published content, right? So, like, there's a lot of educators that just go to a publisher, pick a book, the book comes with pre-published slides. So then you're basically handing it off to some sort of a publishing unit. So, like, we're already doing that to some degree anyway. But yeah, that is a bigger meta level question in terms of like education and pedagogy. Um, and yeah, the individual instructor uniqueness added to the materials. This is actually why we really want to make the code available, right? I think that it's a lot better if educators actually have fine control of the process if they're going to use the materials. And some people might experiment with it, say this is garbage and I'm never going to touch it, and that's totally fine. But I do think that the context, like a lot of people in geography, GI science, we contextualize our materials based on where we are, right? So like I'm at University of Minnesota, so we try to draw examples from Minnesota, the Twin Cities metro area and things like that. And I think that adds a lot of value for students, but not everybody does. And it's not always possible to do that. It's really hard to do that for calculus, for example. Probably possible, but it would be a little harder. So, but no, that's a great comment and something to add. So we have another minute or two. Does anybody have a last kind of question? No. Okay. All right. Well, I do want to thank everyone for their time. Um, And what I want to do is put a little bit of a shout out to check back. So the video will be pushed out, and we will also on the iGuide platform have the code available for people to try, with a link to the video that you can see for yourself. And all that I would say is remember that we're fine-tuning the process and trying to make improvements and understand where the edges are and improve. So if you think it's garbage, tell us why, because the why is what we're trying to learn. And we're obviously being very thoughtful as we're kind of going through it. And I think that it's interesting. I don't know if it's going to be the way, but it is a way that we can start doing this kind of work. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Eric, very much for that. As I said before, we will process the recording and have it up, and these other materials, have them up on the website soon. We do have another VCO coming up next month that's going to focus on the UCGIS GIS&T body of knowledge, something that Eric referenced a couple of times. We have a new platform, a new GUI for that, for the primary platform, and we'll be highlighting that. I think it's April 15th, so you can find out about that on the iGuide VCO webpage. And Eric also mentioned the Community Champions work. All of their materials will be, they're under development still, but those are all definitely focused towards academic audiences and higher ed. And we'll let you know when those are up later in the spring. And those individuals will also be doing VCOs into the summertime. So thanks everyone very much for attending this today. And thanks very much, Eric and Jinzhe, for your careful thoughts on this important topic. Bye, everyone.